It all began with the new school year. I was a junior in high school, a year when everything seemed to matter more. The pressure to maintain my grades was overwhelming, but I was determined to excel. On the first day back, we were introduced to our new math teacher, Mr. Hargrove. He was unlike any teacher I had ever encountered. He had a peculiar aura about him. His eyes seemed to pierce right through you, and there was an unsettling grin that never quite left his face. As the weeks rolled on, the assignments piled up. But it was in Mr. Hargrove's class that things began to take a dark turn. Each week, we were given an assignment that seemed more complicated than the last. It was never just homework. It felt like a twisted puzzle that had to be solved perfectly. The stakes felt high, but I was determined to keep up. One Wednesday afternoon, after yet another brutal day of lessons, I sat in my room staring at my latest assignment. It was a seemingly simple problem involving quadratic equations, but the more I worked, the more frustrated I became. It was as if the numbers danced on the page, refusing to cooperate. As I scratched my head in confusion, I heard a strange noise, like a whisper coming from the shadows of my room. I dismissed it as my imagination, but a shiver ran down my spine. Just then, my phone buzzed. I picked it up to find a message from an unknown number. "Need help? I can assist." I hesitated, but finally replied, asking who it was. "Just a friend who knows math. Let me help you." Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked the link they sent and opened a chat window. They started guiding me through the assignment, explaining concepts I had struggled with. The numbers fell into place and I felt a rush of relief. I thanked them profusely, and as I turned to save my work, a chilling thought struck me. I didn't even know who I was talking to. The next day in class, Mr. Hargrove announced a new policy. From now on, each student would be assigned a homework buddy to collaborate with on assignments. I glanced around the room, scanning for a partner. My friend Sarah sat next to me, her eyes wide with fear. She whispered, "I heard that if you don't do your homework perfectly, something terrible happens." I dismissed her fears, thinking it was just another urban legend to scare students. That was until I overheard a group of students talking after class. They were discussing a girl from the previous year who had vanished after failing a math assignment. The air in the room turned thick with dread, but I shook it off as nonsense. That night, as I sat down to tackle another assignment, my phone buzzed again. The same unknown number reached out, offering help once more. I felt a twinge of unease, but the prospect of acing the homework was too tempting. We chatted for hours, and by the end of it, I felt confident about my understanding. I finished the assignment and submitted it just before midnight, but something felt off. The next day, I walked into math class, expecting Mr. Hargrove to praise my efforts. Instead, he glared at me, his face twisted in anger. "This is unacceptable," he sneered, waving my paper in the air. "You think you can submit something so mediocre?" My heart sank. I had spent hours on that assignment, and I felt my stomach twist in knots as the rest of the class stared at me, confusion and fear etched on their faces. Mr. Hargrove continued, "You'll find out what happens when you disappoint me. Prepare for the worst." The class erupted into whispers. "What does he mean? What happens when you disappoint him?" I tried to shake it off, but dread hung heavy in the air. As I left class, I caught sight of Sarah. "Are you okay?" she asked, worry flickering in her eyes. I shook my head. "Not really. He's acting insane." That night, I received another message from the unknown number. "Did you submit your work? Are you sure it's perfect?" I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I responded, "Yes, I think so. You should double check. You don't want to be the next victim." I didn't sleep that night. I went over my homework searching for mistakes. Every equation looked correct, but anxiety gnawed at me. I had to make sure everything was perfect. I couldn't bear the thought of something happening to me. The next day, I returned to class with a pit in my stomach. My mind raced as I watched Mr. Hargrove collect our assignments. My heart pounded in my chest as he scanned through the papers, an ominous grin spreading across his face. "Very well," he said, pausing dramatically. "I have chosen one of you to be the example, a reminder of what happens when you don't take my assignments seriously." My blood ran cold. The other students looked around, fear and confusion spreading like wildfire. "Sarah," he called out, and I felt a chill race through me. Sarah's face paled. "What did I do?" she asked, panic rising in her voice. Mr. Hargrove leaned closer, a twisted smile on his lips. "You failed to meet my expectations. There are consequences for that." Just then the lights flickered. The air grew thick with tension as the class held its breath. "Please, no," Sarah pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. But it was too late. The classroom door slammed shut, trapping us inside. Mr. Hargrove's eyes glinted with madness. "You think this is just about math? You're all part of something greater. Each wrong answer carries a price." As he spoke, the shadows in the room began to stretch, enveloping Sarah. She screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the darkness. "Get back!" I shouted, but I was frozen in fear. The rest of the class backed away, and the room felt suffocating. When the shadows receded, Sarah was gone. The class erupted into chaos. "What just happened?" I gasped, backing away from the teacher. Mr. Hargrove's grin only widened. "This is just the beginning. You'll all learn that I don't tolerate failure, and I will be watching." We were dismissed, but as I left the classroom, a dark cloud settled over me. I felt a heaviness in my chest, knowing the danger wasn't over. I had to escape this nightmare. I rushed home, and as soon as I walked through the door, my phone buzzed again. "You need to submit your homework again. Perfect it." This time I didn't hesitate. I blocked the number and deleted the app. I wouldn't let it control me anymore. The following days passed in a haze of paranoia. I stopped seeing friends, skipping school to avoid Mr. Hargrove's twisted games. But even in my isolation, the fear lingered. I'd catch glimpses of shadows moving at the corners of my vision, hear whispers echoing through my empty house. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront Mr. Hargrove. I returned to the school, sneaking into the building. The halls were eerily quiet as I approached his classroom. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear him muttering to himself inside. "Just a little more, and they'll understand," he said. "This is for their own good." I pushed the door open slowly. The classroom was dimly lit, and Mr. Hargrove was standing in front of the board, scribbling equations furiously. "What do you want?" he snapped, turning to face me, his eyes wild. "I want to know why you're doing this. Why did you take Sarah?" His face twisted into a deranged smile. "Because she didn't understand the stakes. It's a lesson for all of you. Only those who excel will survive." Survive? This isn't survival. This is madness. "Madness is the price of failure," he said, his voice dropping to a sinister whisper. "And it's coming for you next." I took a step back, panic setting in. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. The shadows in the room seemed to grow, twisting and warping around me. "Help!" I screamed, but my voice echoed back, drowning in the darkness. I felt the cold grip of the shadows wrap around me. Just as they pulled me into their embrace, I thought I heard a familiar voice calling out, "Don't let them take you! Fight back!" In that moment, I remembered the math problems. The equations I had struggled with were not just numbers. They were my escape. I focused on the formulas, the concepts, recalling everything I had learned. With a burst of determination, I shouted into the darkness, "I refuse to fail!" Suddenly, the shadows recoiled, releasing their grip. The lights flickered back on, and I found myself standing alone in the classroom, Mr. Hargrove nowhere to be found. But the relief was short-lived. My phone buzzed one last time. "You may have escaped, but you can never truly leave. I will always be watching." The message sent a chill down my spine. As I fled the school, I knew this wasn't over. The weight of the homework, the dread of Mr. Hargrove, and the whispers of lost souls would haunt me forever. And as I looked back at the darkened windows of the school, I understood the truth. Homework wasn't just about grades. It was a sinister game that demanded perfection. And in this twisted world, failure came with a terrible price.